Hey guys, welcome back to the Tone Show. Today we're going to be talking about films that took the conventional horror ideas, put them on their head, and broke all the rules. These movies looked at what was happening in horror at the time and said, not for me. So I'm going to be breaking down and going through these movies and explaining why each one of these movies has their own little bit of history and has since become iconic for rule breaking in horror. We can't talk about movies that took horror and put it on its head, broke conventions, without talking about the OG Scream, the first Scream. Scream turned horror on its head by making its characters self-aware of horror tropes. Characters discuss the quote-unquote rules of horror right in the movie, while falling victim to a killer who's also self-aware of the rules of horror. That's why this Wes Craven film, being so meta, it made it cool, and it blended satire with true scares, and it basically took the horror genre and revitalized it in a way that's never been done before. That's why Scream deserves definitely a spot on any list about groundbreaking horror movies that changed the genre for good. Next, we got Cabin in the Woods. Speaking of self-aware movies, Cabin in the Woods is very interesting because at first it appears to be, following the regular formulas of horror. You got a couple of friends, they're inside of a cabin, strange things start to happen. This is a horror setup we've seen before, but as the story unfolds, it reveals a hidden organization that's controlling the horror, and it's trying to satisfy like an ancient ritual. And by exposing what I would say is the puppet masters behind horror tropes, the film adds a layer of commentary to the horror itself, making it both like very self-aware and groundbreaking, even though it has some cliches at the beginning of the film. So I think it really builds on when Scream started and took it to another level. So Cabin in the Woods starts off as being something else, but this movie about friends in a cabin doesn't turn into a regular slasher. It actually turns into something quite revolutionary and broke a lot of the rules of genre of horror as well. Of course, we can't talk about groundbreaking horror films without discussing the Blair Witch Project. It basically pioneered the found footage style that we're very much used to now. The Blair Witch Project didn't rely on like traditional horror effects or jump scares. Instead, it built tension like through pure like atmosphere, ambiguity, and by not showing you anything. Basically, you're scared of what you don't see through this movie. And at the time, it was very original. It left viewers haunted by what they saw or didn't see actually more. It's what they were haunted for. And the success of this proved that you don't need like flashy visuals to be terrifying. This movie scared audiences without big budget special effects. And Blair Witch deserves its spot on any list of horror movies that are groundbreaking, and it created its own genre, which is basically the found footage genre, which is very healthy today. We have the VHS franchise, plenty of franchises. It's a low budget entry to horror, and the Blair Witch definitely pioneered that. We can't talk about movies that changed horror and created its own subgenre without talking about 2017's Get Out. Get Out it's a horror movie with social commentary that not only addresses the race issues in America through the lens of horror, but it also kind of like takes the traditional horror method and it turns it on its head. Jordan Peele's film is both terrifying, at the same time it's thought-provoking. And I think this movie, along with a few other movies, is basically what started the whole, the high-class horror, made all this sophisticated horror that we have today. And it started its own genre of horror, breaking new ground by using horror to confront like real-life issues. And this is something that some can say that you can even trace it back to Night of the Living Dead, like the original Living Dead movie, where it took social commentary in a way because its protagonist at the time was black, but it didn't put that in front of the movie. In the same way Get Out, it addresses these issues in America as far as race, but it's not until later in the movie that you discover that you're watching a social commentary film. It's very interesting. And Get Out, basically, it took horror, it took satire, it mixed them together, and it opened the door to its own genre of films. And highbrow horror was born around this time with this movie and a couple others. We gotta also talk about A Quiet Place, right? Quiet Place 2018 is a movie where a new horror rule was introduced. Gotta be quiet. That's what makes A Quiet Place very interesting. It's a movie with virtually like very little talking. There's no dialogue in this one. The core storytelling element in this film is basically the lack of sound. It's just shh, be quiet. Like that's a horror rule in itself, and it spawned its own little franchise. We're on the third movie now with the first chapter, Quiet Place, chapter 1. What's it called? But by breaking traditional horror pacing and focusing on being quiet as a mechanism of like a horror, it really refreshed the approach of how to build suspense. And that's why A Quiet Place deserves a spot on any list with groundbreaking horror movies that kind of changed the genre and created its own subgenre of quiet horror. Another movie we gotta definitely talk about is 2018 Hereditary. Man, this is another highbrow horror film. It's basically, you're watching a tragedy, you're watching what doesn't seem like a horror movie at first. It seems basically like a family that's going through a very tough time in their life. You're following there's a funeral that's happening in this movie at the beginning, and the audience is very confused, like where's this going? It's not the traditional jump scare movie. The movie uses atmosphere and like very disturbing visuals at times to like really unsettle you. And you're thinking, well, I'm looking at a very dark family trauma movie, but it's really a slow burn. And at the end, I'm not ruining it for anybody, you're really shocked at what the outcome is. It's a horror movie, but in a very modern way. So yeah, so Hereditary definitely it blurs the lines between like supernatural horror and psychological horror with its ending. And it really kind of makes the audience question what they're watching the whole time. So it definitely deserves a spot on any list of movies which are groundbreaking that kind of created their own subgenre. So next up, we're going to be talking about It Follows. 2014 It Follows. If you guys watch my channel, you know that I really love It Follows. It really took what we thought before as a creature movie and just took it to the next level. It's like a horror chain letter movie about a creature that's following our protagonist, but it's done in a way that it has commentary like on sex, and it explores fear, it explores guilt, and it does it in an unconventional way by having this creature that's unstoppable just basically follow the main characters relentlessly through the film in a way that we've never seen before. It Follows is very creative, but definitely deserves a spot on any list about groundbreaking movies and horror that definitely break the genre. So there's It Follows. And I'm gonna throw a bonus in here. I think Alien also deserves a spot on any list, and we can make a whole YouTube video about if Alien is a horror movie. To a certain extent, it is, yes, or a sci-fi movie. It's a sci-fi horror movie. I don't know why that's hard for people to get. But I think what makes Alien so interesting, besides the atmosphere, is that it basically took the final girl and put it in sci-fi, in a horror sci-fi movie. Like, we haven't had a character like Ripley before. And honestly, there have been a lot of women who followed in the steps, in the steps of Ripley in this particular character. And we never seen it before. Like, having this female heroine that just really kicked ass in a sci-fi movie with a creature feature. Like Alien, I think it's groundbreaking. You can make, again, countless videos about Alien, but Alien is definitely one of those movies that I think it really broke horror and created its own subgenre of creature feature horror in space in a way that's never been done before, with a female heroine, which is now it's very common to see. Yes, it is a horror movie. You're gonna fight me on the comments on that one. I think these are all films that defy like the horror conventions as we know it, and it surprised audiences in different ways. Each one of these films left a lasting mark on the genre of horror itself. It made filmmakers and audiences evolve. Each one of these films had its own impact, and we're still feeling those impacts. So which movies do you think were groundbreaking and created like their own subgenre in the horror? Put it in the comments, let me know. Do you disagree with any of the movies on these lists? So I definitely encourage you to watch all these movies if you haven't watched them. Always, guys, this is the Tone Show. Enjoy all of these. Tone Show, woo.